the basic lab stuff. I will send out a mailer. And I'll come up with a protocol. To me, the big step with regard to the lab is basically lab reports for you. It's not exam oriented. You'll be happy to know. So I think the single nicest piece is a lab presentation that you'll be doing. I mean, I have to go find the syllabus, but I'll look at it. And and so a lot of you, for whether it's for honors, whether it's for another presentation, whether you're doing research for credit, I don't care. You can recycle it here. Okay, so you don't have to do anything new. It's basically a paper on a topic for physiology that we're going to do in the very last week or two of the lab. And you'll present it. So you'll need to have a 3 to 5 page written report. I don't care about citations. You don't have to footnote it or anything like that. Just give me a list of your references. That's all I care. So you get enough of that from other courses. I don't need it. I want to hear about a topic in physiology or medicine or disease, something, whatever you're going to talk about, you need to look at the physiological implications. So if you're talking about a stroke, you need to point out what happens, what happens to the brain cell, et cetera, that type of thing. If you're talking about a complication of diabetes, it would be nice to know a little bit about the diabetes and how it impacts it. Whatever you want to. I just need you to run the topic by me, so I don't have 3 people doing color blindness, which inevitably happens. And there's only 16 of us, so it shouldn't be hard to find 16 and a lot of you, like I said, are doing that. And so if you're going to do that, and then you're doing your presentation for your because you're a senior on Science Day, do it again. Get warm up. So I'm happy with that kind of a thing. So I don't know. Let me see what else I got to tell you about this syllabus. I don't. I mean, part of me, for my absolute scandalous lack of. Here we are. The Lab Scribe software thing. Here's the Lab DocX. So, like I said, we're meeting here. Everything else is pretty standard stuff. Yeah. Okay. So this typically, I'm betting that the midterm and final are probably going to be of the take-home variety. Don't. It's for you, not for anybody else. I like the golf shirt.
Thank you.
If my back would only let me play more. And so the written report with an oral presentation. And most of the time you come up here, you just email it to me. We'll come up here, you log in on my email and find where you sent it and download it, or you can put a floppy drive in, or one of those little junk drives. Floppies were a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Anybody, you familiar with those little diskettes? Every so often we find a box of those and they sell like crazy. And so everything else is, basic. So it's a very, for the grading from before, for those, and that's you, who have not been here, it's hard not to do well. Just show up and you'll do well. Everybody gets a good grade except for them. Don't say it.
Don't start your crap today, man. It's the first day.
Of the rest of our life.
Like the 3rd week.
It's going to be tough on lab day. So, and here we're going to talk about the technology. So that's everything I have to tell you. All the rest of the stuff is the standard. How many syllabi have you seen? And for some of you, this will be the very end of syllabization. Is there a word? Syllable dynamics. So I digress. So, okay, what I'll probably start a little bit and talk about is the eye after we do a little bit about this. So normally, in lecture, we'll be doing, and they overlap so much. We'll be doing, like I said, the lecture topics are going to be the cell that we're going to finish, which we effectively have finished up. We'll start muscle phys on Wednesday, and the other unit will be neurophys. Exactly how far we'll do all of muscle phys and some of neuro. That will probably constitute the first exam, along with the cell. And the other part, the other sort of nugget for neuro comes in here. And so I start to do this in the lab. And if you remember this chapter 13, we had done for those who had, and there's only one who wasn't with me with the anatomy, this is where we talk about, we covered the eye, the ear. And basically that's where we're going to look at the physiology of nerves a little bit, but mostly eye and ear physiology. So that, and I typically do that in the lab. Then the next topic is endocrine, I do in lecture, immunology in lecture, and typically blood vessels, and heart particularly, we do lab-wise. So that's kind of like, I'm guessing that the eye and the heart phys might be the midterm for lab, and I'll figure out what goes in at the end. Repro will certainly be there. Okay, I mean, that's because some stuff doesn't, like endocrinology and immunology are lecture topics by far. There's very little laboratory, and it's mostly theoretical stuff and understanding the dynamics from that point. Where we can do, and we'll do this in lab, like when we start doing the muscle, if we're doing the wet lab with rabbit muscle on Monday, then in 2 weeks on Monday, we'll do a lab with grip strength. We're using this technology. For instance, so I've done this a number of times before. I keep kind of playing with it a little bit. I have to order some stuff, and so some of it will be dependent on when I get everything in. But we use, it's kind of like if you ever seen a hospital where they put like an EKG on somebody, you have those little like peel apart sticky. I gotta get more of those. I'm running out of those. And I'm hoping that this system can use almost any of those, rather, because they're entirely too expensive if you buy them from the manufacturer. Like, I mean, I got a ridiculous price of like $400, and I'm not going to ask us to pay for that, but I found one, I can get 50 of them for $15. That sounded a little bit more reasonable. So I'll do a Badger check, a Dr. Badger check to find out what's going on with that. So that's it. So let me go on to the iWork stuff and what I had given it to you before. And I did send you, where'd it go? So iWorks is interesting. We about 3.5 years ago, when we found a little extra money, which is always a good thing. So here it is. The iWorks is this system. This is the main control unit. We have other units that are peripheral we can do. And the fun things to do with it are the electrocardiography, EMG, maybe some EEG, electroencephalography. You don't get a lot out of that. The electromyography you do, the respiratory functions are fun to do. So there's at least 4 or 5 of these that really lend themselves well to this. And I'll do a demo one. So more information anticipated. And like I said, the nugget about the wet labs. So I sent you the sign-in stuff separately, did I not? No, that's what I was going to go over.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So what you're looking for, and the trouble if you're on a university computer, I think what they tell me, and I had the IT people put this on. Now, I don't know about classroom computers, but if you're in the library, or if you're on your own computer, it's easy. So I'll show you where the thing is. So if you do, you look for this, the Lab Scribe download. So this is, and it comes from, the name of this company is called iWorks. I had looked at a number of these, and they were all pretty expensive. This was probably the most affordable one. I got a lot of information about using these from Dr. Hannah's husband, who does a lot of the physiology I think he's chairing the department over at Indiana. Yeah, not Indiana, Cal, whatever they're calling that now. So here's so on your own computer, you should have no trouble using it. So if you have a Windows platform or a Mac platform, as long as you're up to date with your software. Yes?
Just so you know, if you're trying to show us something.
Well, it's not, I'm sorry. Because I had the other thing on. I apologize. Thank you. I'm working on it.
I know.
I'm trying to juggle 2 things at once.
I know.
It's what I like to call walk and chew gum syndrome. Hard to do 2 things like that together.
Yeah.
Okay, so here, So you go to iworks.com. I just put LabScribe download, Googled it. It's the first thing that came up. So the unit, and we're using the TA or teaching assistant kit. So if you have a Windows platform, as many do, and what we use here in school, or you have this. Now, again, I think the school is, I'm going to try to verify that with the IT folks. And you would end up downloading that. I have the latest one, the 2023, and the installer and the software. We have students were creating their own, and you don't need to do that. We just use mine. So we have unlimited downloads of this and unlimited users of this just with my set of credentials. So basically I sent them to you before, but for fun, I'll send them. It's just my small. I don't think it matters. Stein at RMU.edu, and then it's capital IWORX 2019 with something after it. I forget what was, an exclamation point after it, I think. But I'll generate and send it to you. Those are your login credentials, and you have that done. So I would ask you to, if you're having trouble doing it and you want to use my computer, fine. Okay. I do not know. I'll have to look here. They told me that if I looked at, on some, and I don't know if it's in these with regard to apps, that you could, and I tried to find it. Yeah, it's not on this one. But I mean, there should be computers, and I'm going to find out specifically from the IT people how you can find this. So it should already be on board, and you would just have to log in from a library computer or a computer lab computer, I hope. Okay? So that was the first part of this. So let me show it to you up close and personal. And normally we typically need one or two people to do this, depending. So a lot of times when we do this in the lab, it will have a volunteer who we can put the leads on. It's all non-invasive. We're not sticking anybody with anything, and there's not enough current to generate any type of a problem. And so most of them is just one person. Here, the demo lab that I do is a little bit different. So I'll get back and log back into my own office computer. All this technology stuff. And that's why I wanted this lab, because they already have the HDMI input in this, which make my life easier. So, for instance, this is one of these foundation tests. So effectively what this is, the black line indicated when a prompt was given. So in the case of auditory, somebody said mark or said now. And this indicated how quickly the person responded by pressing a plugged in button. So I got all sorts of peripherals with it. See, like that. So someone would say mark, and you would see that. You don't have to have your eyes closed. Just boom, boom, boom. And the person would vary it. They'd say mark, then they say mark. Maybe wait a few seconds, mark. So you do it 10 times. And the beauty of the system is you're trying to gauge how rapid the response is. How do you do this scientifically? Are these red lines. So you put your red line here where the person indicated the start point was, and then let's say you put the next red line at the start of your response. And you go over here, and you can take a look. That's 195 milliseconds. So it took the person less than, a 20th of a fifth of a second, 195 seconds to respond to that. That's pretty quick. And so you could do this with, if you had electrocardiographs, so you could see the distance between the P wave and start of the QRS complex. You could look at a respiratory function, because you can measure both vertically and horizontally. In this case, we're doing a horizontal. This would be So you can take a look at the different times when it takes into all of them. You can measure voltage differences if it's applicable, which it is not here. So it allows you to do that. And then we can, by using these mountain diagrams, you can compress them or expand them, depending on what you want to do. And then we can modify them to fit by, we can, to some extent, adjust these. And I usually am using one of these two buttons to adjust it. So effectively, if I wanted to modify, I just start to hit this. And then the person would, let's say they'd hear the word mark, and they'd hit, a particular button. I think they hit F1. And mark F1. And, you would be able, and we'll go over the protocol. When they're hitting the mark, they'll be hitting a particular thing to be able to do that. Like using this, but I don't know what this. And then we stop it, and basically I can then share this with you, which I'm not going to do. So I'm just going to exit and put a new one. I don't want to save it because I didn't want to save the changes with it. And so and these are the ones we use most frequently. I'll show you. So you go to Tools, and it's possibly you might have to load the group rather. You'll go to Settings, and if you haven't already, the first thing you end up having to do is to load the group. And while there's a lot of these, we start with the foundation ones. So we have one with blood pressure, breathing parameters, cardiography with exercise. I don't know if they're going to let us do it. Logistically, it might be difficult, and I have to see what's going on. I really like to try to do these in that North Athletic Complex and measure people, like if they're, getting on, before you get on the treadmill, do some exercise there and then get off. And I've done that before. And for about 3 years, we haven't done it vis-a-vis COVID and all sorts of restrictions. So whether or not we're going to be able to do that, I don't know. And believe me, I need to get to the gym. Don't even start.
I didn't say anything, I just looked at you.
That's what I mean.
All right, just saying.
It's my wife says to me, get my corpulent posterior to the gym. Because she would never say, get your fat ass to the gym. She's nice. So all of those, the muscle activity and strictly. So the one we're going to do, this is side hearing reflexes. So we do the same size. And when you put this on, it gives you an idea of what to do. So we're using the event marker. And it says the event marker, and you put that into a particular location on basically our main device, which is this. So this gets plugged in on that side into EM1 port, which is here. That's the first. So it tells you what to do. And then it's reaction to time and sound. So you tell the person, watch the right side of the computer and quickly press the event marker button, bang, when the black line appears on the screen. Okay? So that's what they do. The directions for the other student, the one who's working with them, the person will press F1, that creates the black line, and so the person visually will be looking when that line appears and hit the button. So if we go back, so now it's up there as it's running. So I mean, it's not obviously if you're doing, so you hit F1 and then hit this. If you're trying to do something like that, and hopefully I wonder why my F1 was not functioning here. Hold on.
On computers like that, you usually have to hold down the Alt button in order to get the F keys to actually function as F keys.
You have to hold Alt at the same time?
Yeah, usually.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Thank you.
Or the FN button is probably a safer.
Which button?
FN, I don't know.
Oh, the function button. Yeah, I hear you. Oh, you're right. Thank you. Okay, so if you're doing this, follow the advice. So have your thumb on F1 all the time and just hit. If I have your thumb on function and just use your other finger to hit F1. And see what I'm doing? And then when I hit this, it creates that little sort of, that device. Great. And you would do the same thing for the sound. And for the sound one, basically the person would have their eyes closed. This one's a little harder because you'd be here and they'd be over they'd have to be looking. So they could actually hold this, sit over here and look at the screen while you're doing the computer. So that would be advantageous with this room. Okay. So, and then I stop it. And then then like I said, like you can increase it or you can compress it until you find an area. It really doesn't, it's not so applicable here, but you can see what we're looking at. And then we just calculate the distance, right? So we're not going to do any calculations today. This is just for fun. So I need, count them, 2 volunteers, not one.
For what?
One person to be the button pusher and one, are you going to be the button pusher?
Yeah.
You're going to respond to the prompts. And we have oh God, Lord help me.
Does the other person get to be in charge?
The other person's in
I
charge.
should be that person.
Yeah, always.
I'll do that one.
I don't, I did not have to say it, right? I just sounded.
Yeah. That's fine.
I love it. Dr. Come on.
Yes. Well, you can't do it from back there. So you're going to sit over here with the button in your hot little hand.
What am I doing?
No, she's up here where I am. You're over there where the button is.
Oh.
Now.
Oh, you're sitting the little one. That's nice.
Can I press it real quick?
What?
Can I press
No, we're not
Well, it
ready
doesn't
yet.
matter. It's not going to help you now.
it?
So for fun, like I said, so you're going to basically you'll have your, so you don't have to say anything initially. It'll just be the F1 and the line once it starts to work. So you hold this down and whenever you want, you create the line for it. But you want to do it about 10 times, but not in a pattern. So, you're not going to say count to 2 every time and do that.
Okay.
So sometimes they'll be close together, sometimes they'll be far apart, so that you're not trying to anticipate. So do it for practice. Are you ready?
Yeah.
You should be looking up there. So go ahead.
Wait, so I can hit
F1 and then
What are you gonna say?
F1.
No, now you're just going for that black line.
Oh, I just looked.
Yeah, and
Oh,
whenever you see it,
Wait, when?
where is it gonna come up?
go to the
F1?
far edge of the screen. See it? Whenever you're ready, you can tell them when you're getting ready to start.
Oh, okay. Well,
Anytime now, be ready.
Do I?
Yeah, and then you're gonna do that. So whenever,
Oh, okay. So when
when
I
you see
see
the lines, you're gonna look that far, right?
this is.
Steffi, come on.
I see it. I
Hit
got
the
it.
shit. Let's go. God, your reaction time is terrible.
You do it like even.
I don't know
What do you mean?
Oh, never mind.
When do you want me to stop?
Okay.
Oh, gee. It's a
No,
touch
you-
screen?
Yeah,
I got it. Okay.
Hey, I rate.
So confused.
No, we're gonna do
God,
what
you're
we're
so
gonna do.
tech savvy.
They gave me this.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
keeping this. When I
Okay.
retire, I'm demanding they give me a computer or this one or.
You could
one
just
like
steal it.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I see it come at the end, I just.
Yeah. So now you're ready to do it for
Yeah.
real?
Yeah.
So we're gonna go to new. Do we want to save this? Not on a bet. So you see how to,
That was good.
you ready? And so you be ready, and once you're ready, start to hit record, and so you can operate this as well as I can.
Okay, so I do it 10 times.
Yeah, but you have to get,
Well, yeah, I'm getting all the rules. Okay.
just tell them when you're ready to start.
Oh, I hit record.
Okay.
Oh. I think that was 10.
Okay.
Hit stop. Okay.
Yeah, just.
Okay.
Like I said, you can touch it.
Okay.
You're fine. And so, what you basically then, you see where like you can, when you start, you're starting to bring these in together.
That's a volcano.
Really. I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Okay. I just want to make sure you knew.
I'm trying to get where my. Whoa. Come on, see it.
I just want everyone to know that Stein messed it up, not me.
So I'll find it.
Okay. Do you want your seat back or?
No,
Okay.
Hi, Jordan. How you doing?
You hitting the button?
I'm not touching it.
No, were you before?
Oh, yeah, I was.
I don't want to see it.
No,
Oh, this is
not at
awful.
all.
All right.
No, I was just looking at it.
Okay, let me just do, then let's do this again.
Okay.
Let's see if we can do this again. So this will be time 0. So are you ready to try this again?
Yeah.
Let's see if I can get this.
Yeah, I'm hitting record, Seppi.
Okay. Oh my God, what's
Whoa.
happening? What's going on?
Whoa, too fast.
Okay, I didn't.
Oh, whoa, whoa.
My reaction time's not that good.
It wasn't good the first time when it was.
How did you think?
I'm a
Let's
good
do
button
the
pusher.
old here.
I just think it's funny that Stein's in the little chair. Like, I just think that's so funny because I could have sat there.
Don't give me a hard time.
I'm not.
I should be able to get back to the. Okay, now we should not, I mean, speed wise, I have to check the setting.
He's looking to slow it down for you. Tech is what he's trying to say, but be nice about it.
Oh, you're killing me.
I didn't do anything. I'm doing better than you.
Let's see. Just for fun, press it. Better. Okay. We're fine.
We're fine.
Yeah. Now we should be able to. Obviously, when I was futzing around with it, I'll get these correct. Don't worry about it. Okay. So we'll get a new. We'll discard the other one. And hold on. Now you can get ready to get your.
Okay.
Whenever you want to hit record, and then.
So I'm recording.
Faster than before. Damn.
Okay, that was 10.
Okay. Perfect.
You hit the button when I
Yeah, this
didn't
is
even
an
hit the
accurate
line.
fire.
Yeah, I didn't even hit the.
Yeah, this is better. Now this, we're trying to get them so they're close enough together that you can do the measurements with them. That was on me. So I mean, again, so you.
What happened here? Is that when he messed up?
It probably was. And so what we'll do is we will be
Trigger
able
finger?
to. It's almost like so here you can kind of see if we take this here, and then this one, that red one here.
But why are we taking those anywhere?
Well, we average we so four so less than a half of a second, 180 milliseconds. And what you do is you like randomly you can take 10 of them or any of the ones that appear like they weren't like double hits, and just try to get a number out of them. Okay, so let's say the average, if we would just for fun, went elsewhere like to here, and this one looks a little closer, be wrong. And so that's 255. That's pretty fast. Now, I don't know whether it was because random or not. Now, next one of these you're going to do with your eyes. So we'll save this.
With your eyes.
Yeah, with his eyes closed.
Oh God,
How the hell is he gonna know when
that's so much better.
I have but
I would rather hear it than look at it.
yeah, but what if I'm not?
Well, you have to.
You have to
say
be-
the same.
You
say the
can't
same-
be fooling them.
He's saving it now.
Where's the fun for that?
Like as soon as you have to go, boom.
Okay, so
I'll put my
effectively
fist on it.
with your eyes closed, the way, and we'll do one for fun just to see how it works. Or you make something,
What?
tell them what you're going to say. No,
Look at
you're going to say either like now, mark, go, whatever word you agree upon
Okay.
that is his, and you're going to do the same thing, except when he hears you, he's going to press the button.
Okay.
Only when you hear it, just once.
What word do you want, Zach?
Go.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll do one for fun. Let's take.
I'm gonna start recording. All right.
Do any of you find this scintillating?
Go.
If nothing else,
Go. 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 Okay. We don't have to go anymore.
yeah, here.
I
Now,
can't count when I say go. Like
It's
that's
okay.
like
You
two
don't have
different-
to. I mean,
God.
this is for this one's the only one where we really have to do it like this. So let's take
You
a
are
look
better
at
at that.
how fast this was. Now look at the average of these. 305. And I mean, with the visual ones, I think what you will find consistently. So we'll get this one over here, more or less. And you can always overlap one and bring that one over there, the other. And they're at 285. So in general, which one would you guys think would be faster? Audio cues or visual cues? Audio cues, because it takes a while for your vision to see something and say, give the message to your finger. When you're just listening, you don't have to wait for that visual. You can boom. And a lot of people, it's somewhat counterintuitive. Oh, I see faster than I hear. It's like in the car. I respond faster to a vehicle up front doing something than me hearing, and it's not because of hearing a siren or hearing a horn. We respond very quickly. So the idea is that, and most people, if you would screen people who didn't have any scientific knowledge, most likely they would say, oh, I do much faster if I see something. And the reality is no, when you hear something. Because there's no confusion, particularly when you close your eyes. And it's just your hearing. It's like someone who loses their sight, or has their sight compromised, how acute their hearing. Thank you. Now, that was just a demonstration.
Oh, so you want me to leave?
Oh, you can stay here if you want.
Oh, we're done.
We're done.
Oh, all right. Whatever.
Yeah.
I was having fun. That was fun. We can do it again.
We can play, it's kind of like reversing the classroom.
What do you mean? Oh, because I was in charge? I'm not. Okay.
Because it's like Dr. Hill was always talking about flipping the classroom. I have no idea what that means. I mean, there's all sorts of, they do with the teaching center here.
I would like Dr. Hill to take her own test. Because sometimes I'll ask her a question and she'll be like, I worded that better.
She's young.
I love Hillwick. I'm not crapping on her.
Oh, no, hey, I'm with you. We are so fortunate to have a group of people who, how can you get, 10 quote unquote highly educated people that get along? It's just very unusual. We are blessed. I mean, that's why I don't want to retire.
Are you going to sign another contract?
I might. I like the money.
That's true.
Okay, so everybody, that was the demo. So hopefully the next time we're going to do EMG and muscle strength. And that's one of these, and I'll show it to you. Again, that's a foundations lab, muscle activity and grip strength. And we don't want to save the current file. So there's no need to do that. So, I mean, I have enough of these saved anyway. But what becomes here, it becomes you can have multiple things being measured. So when we do this lab, I have to get out this. So this is another peripheral that we plug in, and it's color coded, and we use these. And then somebody will have, for instance, on their forearm, a sensor here and a sensor here. And they'll have like a ball like this to grip. And how long you can hold that. Theoretically, the longer you hold it, particularly if it's filled up, eventually your grip's going to weaken. You can watch the electrical activity married to the grip strength. So it's pretty interesting. So that's kind of the capabilities that we have with this. And it lends itself to the physiological. So we can measure pulse with this. There's a peripheral we don't have for pulse ox, but I have another device that can measure pulse ox fairly easily. This is just going to be something we utilize this with electrocardiograph to measure pulse rate. And you usually put it on your thumb or your middle finger and then wrap it around. So that's kind of what we do with this. So there's a variety of other things that you can do. We can do blood pressure. The breathing one utilizes this material. I haven't employed this yet with the stethoscope. Stethoscopes, if you didn't know it, have two. This one does not. A normal stethoscope has a flat area, it's called the diaphragm, and it has an open area, it's called the bell. We typically utilize the bell when you're listening for heart sounds. The diaphragm, just basic work. So if you go to the doctor, most of the time they're listening to your chest. in their back and things like that. Or you're going to use the diaphragm. And if they think there's an arrhythmia or maybe you have a heart murmur, then they're flipping use the belt. You listen for something called a bruit, which is it's like a blood vessel that has damage and the blood doesn't flow. It makes a very interesting whooshing sound, sort of like waves. And it's something we utilize a lot. That's when you're familiar with what a Doppler is? Anybody? Okay.
Like the Doppler effect.
Yeah,
Doppler.
Doppler in medicine
Oh.
is a device that uses basically an ultrasonic device that is able to listen to the sounds of blood flowing. And so you can hook it directly into like a speaker system on a computer if you want to, or you can just do it through a stethoscope and listen. And it's one of the ways we listen for things like aneurysms or obstructed blood flow. So we used a lot in peripheral vascular studies. A friend of mine in practice had a device. It did multiple things. It was like fairly expensive, but it would measure Doppler devices and blood flows and other types of reading, skin temperature. All those are things when we do a workup for called PVD or peripheral vascular disease. You see a lot in diabetics, certainly. Just filling you in. All right, on with the show. We'll see what the time is. It's good. Give me about 40 minutes or so to introduce, and 4:30 we can be adios. I can rescue the dog from Camp Bow Wow. He'll hate me. You said
Why don't you ever bring him in?
there was a dog in here today.
Did
Who's
Dress bring his dog?
No, it wasn't Ginger. Who was that? Who the fellow had a dog today? Anybody? Pardon me?
Oh, Charlie. The dog, Charlie? Charlie Brown, the golden retriever. I don't know what man Charlie's.
My dog would be, well, let's say there'd be a lot of cleaning up to do. He's like, the best thing about taking him to Camp Bow, when I pick him up about 6:00, he comes in, he eats, and he camps out on the couch. Next thing you know, oh, Dad, I've had such a long day. You want to watch TV? You want to watch Monday Night Football? Go ahead. Okay, so that's the introductory nugget. Next week is a little different, so it involves a whole lot, a little bit of talking about, but it'll dovetail into our muscle phys, and we'll have already had, basically 3 classes worth of muscle phys going on with that. So we'll start from here, and I'll do the PNS thing, and basically give you an idea. So PNS is your peripheral nervous system anatomically. It is it's, to me, the simplest definition is anything sticks out. Remember, the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord. Anything that protrudes from it is peripheral nervous system, period. So we did a lot of the anatomy with it, and I'm not going to revisit the wheel or redo cranial nerves. And I know, and hopefully many of you recall that or are able to look it up. But basically, we look a little bit generically and at some of the things that go on. So the peripheral nervous system, anything that protrudes, and basically, if you remember the way, it's basically either incoming, afferent, we pronounce it A-F-F-E-R-E-N-T, or efferent for outgoing or effectors. Those are the 2 major components, and almost all the nerves we encounter are mixed nerves. They have a little bit of each. Some may have predominantly sensory, some predominantly motor. In the motor division, we have ones that go to organs we call autonomic, and ones that go everywhere else. Muscles, joints, bone, etc. Those are somatic. Somatic implies of the body. Of the autonomic division, and we do a whole chapter on this, it's fascinating, as important as any chapter we do in physiology, because that's the major controls that your brain has over your organs. That's the autonomic nervous system. Sympathetic and parasympathetic. It's not a long unit, it's extraordinarily important. So, but we're dealing here with the peripheral nervous system, whether it's internal or external, the sensation itself, and the perception, your interpretation thereof. And again, I'm not going to rebuild it. We covered this a little bit, whether they're on the outside, whether they're dealing with organs or blood flow inside, or they're somewhere in between. and there's a lot of process. And I'm not going to go into the kind of signals or the field, but what we get a lot of, and what a lot of this chapter that we're going to cover with eye and with hearing is the concept of transduction. It's changing a signal from one to another. In the old days, we referred to these as, quote, special senses. What made them special is changing them from one type of input to another. For the eye, we're taking a photo signal, a visual signal, and that light changing a particular chemical from one shape to another, triggering a response, and then us taking that response and converting it to an electrical signal. So what you typically see are sensory, rather than going sensory in between motor, we get a sensory to convert it to electrical, and then in between, and then motor. So you have sensory nerves in sequence or sequentially placed. That's where you're going to see, remember in anatomy, we talked about bipolar nerves. Those are those in-between sensors. And so you're going to see that a lot here. And I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to spend any appreciable time other than minimal time on smell and taste, because they're chemical sensors. And basically they're a bit more simplistic than the eye and the ear that are there. And so, and you know, and the idea of this is where you're more sensitive, you have more receptors. So facially, we have a lot more receptors. If you go back anatomically and you remember that homunculus, that basically that upside down sort of inverted diagram of where, you know, like in the middle of our back, we have hardly any sensors at all. Whereas on our face, you know exactly where something struck you or a bug lit on you or anything like that, as opposed to your back, which sort of like, there's something there, I just don't know where. So it has to do with the abundance of sensor. So the smaller the field, the more accurate the location by the brain. And then the whole idea of, and we'll talk more about, particularly as we get into muscle, generating certain kinds of potential and distinguishing them from a generated potential versus an action potential. And and there's a lot of adapting that goes on. It'd be just like being outside in this cold snap we've had. To a certain extent, not that you get used to it, but you can go out there. Boy, it's really cold. Be out there for a while before you come back and go, boy, it's really cold out there. You know, there's a certain adaptation. The concerts and going to loud sounds or things like that are just examples along that time. So some things don't know, because you can see they call it the adapting phasic by definition, tonic, slowly or not at all, pain, and pain's an interesting phenomenon in of itself. And remember what proprioceptors are, that's your knowing where your body is in time and space and place. And saying it all, closing your eye, you know you're all sitting, or you know where your hands are, you know if you have a pen, your hands on your keyboard, you know, that's just telling you where things are. A little bit more about this is more anatomical. In general, sensory circuits have 3 levels wherever the sensation occurs, and then it is basically carried either to the spinal cord or to the medulla. That's the first order nerve. The second order nerve takes it to the thalamus. The thalamus is the relay center, and it basically directs the signal, whether it's auditory to temporal lobe, visual to occipital lobe, general sensory to parietal lobe, where basically it shuttles it on its way. So is there some processing that goes on? Absolutely. And it depends on where it is. Okay. And so these are all the types of things. Detecting, ability to detect the stimulus, the magnitude, and remember, I'll say it a bunch of times, when it comes to the nervous system, frequency is amplitude. It's not, when you hear something loud, it's not one big pound. It's how fast that signal is coming to you. This is quiet and is loud or louder. So it's how rapidly it comes. That's how your brain interprets magnitude, not the amplitude of the individual signal. And then depending on the area it is, and a variety, I mean, you know, I think this varies myself, complex different things or qualities Some people are better at that than others. I think there's a genetic, my own personal spin. I think there's a genetic basis where it's like, as much as I like to cook, I'm always, is there too much salt or not enough salt? I just don't seem to get that. Maybe that has to do a lot with all the years I smoked. And I'm sure that played a role.
Smoking what?
I smoked cigarettes for 40 years. Not good for your health. I'm here to tell the tale. May 10th, 73. My ex was 73 yesterday. And I wish she enjoyed better health than she does, but that's a whole other aside. But that's all right. Yeah, hey. And the two younger grandkids send wonderful videos because my wife's birthday was the 9th. Just, yeah, I know. Don't ask her. No numbers. She's refusing to admit,
Okay.
but she has Medicare. That's as far as we're going. It's okay. So, and pattern recognition. Some people, it's a lot of it. Being able to hear something on the radio or playing and knowing what the song is. I mean, a lot of it depending on what music you like. And so the pain is important for a variety of reasons. We'll get into the neurotransmitters. We'll talk about substance P. We'll talk about glutamate. We'll talk about the endorphins and other endogenous compounds and the role that they play in that. It's very interesting, I think. And there's a lot of, pain is another one of those interesting things which people have varying tolerances to. It is remarkable. So there's a lot of genetics. The whole idea of visceral or referred pain. Referred pain means it's traveling on the same circuit. And we saw this chart before, but I think it's fun to reiterate. Because visceral means there's not a whole lot of sensors in your stomach, so being able to say, is my pain in my stomach or my small or my large intestine? Very hard to do. And then the referred pain, the classic areas that they show you, which are fascinating. Okay, it being, as you can see, coming down that medial aspect of your arm and along the whole upper extremity from the chest, even a little bit into the neck. That's classic heart attack related pain. It's not the only. And I think I told you this. If somebody like me, you get a person, 70-plus-year-old person with high blood pressure, who's overweight, and goes into the hospital, it doesn't have to be 70. If I was 50 or 40, the first 63 things, if I tell them I've got chest tightness, abdominal pain, neck, difficulty in swallowing, first 63 things, they're going to rule out her heart. Because the golden rule of medicine is you want to eliminate what could kill somebody first. Whatever is the most dangerous thing, you got to make sure is it there or not there, and if it's there, what are we going to do about it? That's rule number one. Okay, because you can pretty up the other stuff. Other stuff you can deal with. So there's a lot of overlap. I always give you the example you might remember about lungs and diaphragm during enteroscopic procedures, particularly when we're having gynecological procedures or any of those types of things where they do it through scope. Abdominally, they blow it up with carbon dioxide that pushes on the diaphragm. They get shoulder pain if you're having a gallbladder removed like this, or if they're doing some type of OBGYN type of procedure. So that just little bits of that. Phantom limb pain kind of is along that sort of line that's there. There's other things that people do. We weren't doing epidurals when we did amputations routinely. So we had a lot of people with phantom limb pain. Epidurals were relatively new on the scene. And only the anesthesiologists were starting to do therapeutic blocks at that time. We were just starting to see the advent of pain clinics. I said pain is complex. And the biggest single problem I feel that we had over the last 4 years was mistaken research. And I could have told them that from day one, that they didn't think that excessive use of opiates were going to cause significant addictive problems. And maybe you're familiar with all the oxycodone lawsuits and Purdue Pharma I mean, there was so much garbage going around about that. I mean, the hardest things a lot of us had to do was to deal with people. Like when I do my micro unit and talk about shingles, the hardest thing I had to do with treating shingles is get people off pain pills. We didn't have any antivirals. There was no Valtrex out there. You're putting them on oxycodone and hoping to wean them off of it. Not that easy. It's a pain in the neck. I mean, and for those of you who are endeavoring to go into medical practices or get a DEA number where you can prescribe narcotics and things like that, which would medicine, dentistry, veterinary, all those types of things, it's scary because it's on you. I had a lady, and I didn't know it. She was taking care of her elderly mother. She was in her 60s, and she'd come in and ask me at the time we used a lot of Darvocet, which I don't think they use anymore. And she, oh, could you give me some of these? My arthritis is killing me. I got to take care of mom. Oh, sure. So every month she'd come in, and I'd treat her, and I'd write her a prescription for 60 Darvocets. Okay, but all of a sudden, I get a guy coming in from the state. Do you know Mrs. So-and-so? Sure, it's a patient of mine. Did you prescribe her Darvocet? Yes. She goes, there's 6 other doctors in the area that are all prescribing her Darvocet? I went, hell no. And she had one of those it was the early days where you had state-assisted copays. And that's how they tracked her. I mean, at the very least, you could have paid cash. Safety. I mean, it's hard to go. Next time she came and said, I can't write you a prescription anymore. The state said that they could take away my license. I'm sorry. And you'll learn that. If you're in a licensed field, whatever your field of endeavor is, I say it 1,000 times, licenses are very hard to get and very easy to lose. I'm telling you. So don't play fast and loose with your license. Don't fornicate vertically. F up. Explain it to Hannah.
I got it. Okay. Ben, you don't understand.
Explain it to Ben, please.
I personally took
That's
that as don't sleep. At first, I personally took that as don't sleep with your boss or your subordinate, which is equally good advice.
Exactly. Exactly. Very good advice. We've learned that over the years. I'm recording this.
It's just going to us, right?
I posted on YouTube.
Big Brother is listening.
Okay, well, that's fine.
Didn't you have to read 1984 when you were in high school? Everybody usually does.
Nope.
You didn't.
I read like 1742 or whatever.
The regular classes read it. The honors classes instead read A Tale of Two Cities.
1984 is more interesting.
Yeah, right?
Much more interesting. More fascinating. And 2 really good movie depictions.
That
Of it.
Fahrenheit 451.
Fahrenheit 451 would be another one.
I really wanted to read, but they didn't have us read in high school.
I understood it, I don't know.
So, okay, different kinds of receptors, everybody. Remember this? Pressure receptors, mechanical, thermal for heat, photo for light. Most of the ones in our body are chemoreceptors. They respond to chemicals, particularly things like neurotransmitters. And endocrine. Generically, NOC means pain. All you have to know. I don't care about extero and interoproprioceptors in joints, muscles, tendons, body position signals that are there. I'm not going to do the anatomy of non-encapsulated versus encapsulated. I don't think it's that significant for our purposes that are there. They are, like pain receptors typically are non-encapsulated. Okay, so they respond to a lot of chemical changes that are there. Okay, and we'll talk a lot about histamine and its impact vis-a-vis itching because it dilates blood vessels, and that really can lead to a localized swelling and problems associated, etc. And so there's a little bit of that stuff, all that garbage, which brings us to the eye. The most important statement's right up top. 70% of your sensory receptors are involved in the eye. Half of your brain, visual processing. For something that is so tiny. Now, I don't want to revisit the anatomy so much here other than to highlight a little bit of it. So, with that, I mean, so effectively, you recall this illustration, so the pigmented, remember there's 3 layers. The outer layer, called the sclera, meaning hard, is a particular connective tissue, mostly collagen. Because of its arrangement, it's white and opaque. The vast majority of it, at least about 85%. And the part that covers your iris and the pupil is clear, and that's the cornea. Underneath that, or deep to that, rather, is that pigmented layer, which effectively prevents scattering of the light. Its extensions form the apparatus that open and close the pupil that are there. It contains the pupil, which can, because of that ciliary zone or ciliary muscle, control both the lens, you remember the suspensory ligaments and all that type. So without going to the mechanics of that, which I think is more anatomy. And with the blood vessels that you see reflected there are in the membrane that covers that exposed area, which is the conjunctiva. That doesn't cover the iris and pupillary area but it covers the white of the eye, and we can see the blood vessels with particular photography, and more so after trauma, or more so after, with bloodshot eyes, when someone hasn't had enough sleep or has had too much to drink, etc., etc. And so we're not going to go into all that, and the lacrimal and the caruncle and the eyeglass. I don't care, and don't. This is all anatomical. Again, the conjunctiva or conjunctiva. I mean, the biggest problem with that is when it gets irritated or damaged, and it can lead to. And there's so many different things that can do it, both traumatic in nature and infectious in nature. Significant. I don't know if you covered it with micro birth process wise, and the problems when we have various kinds of sexually transmitted disorders, gonorrhea notorious. That was why we to this day use antibacterial agents. We use antibiotics mandatory when a baby's born, just to make sure that we're not going to deal with some type of blindness that can come from some type of transmitted disorder, particularly sexually transmitted disorders. Etc., etc. Basically, here you have the lacrimal gland going to the duct, washing over the eye, etc. We're not going to redo the extrinsic muscles again. Do you remember your LR6 SO43 down the road? It might come in helpful. Remember that, everybody?
Got it.
These are the little things I do for no additional compensation
Thank you.
to make your lives better.
Thank you. You're welcome, Hannah. Thank you for thanking me. Ah, no problem, Stein. Anyway, continue. Manners? Jeez. Fine.
Get a shooter. Okay. That's anatomy. Remember, everything goes, just refresh your recollection of that. Remember, these are sensory nerves. The sensors emanate out from the blind spot. So the blind spot is the confluence of the blood vessels and nerves. So everything in the retinas, as you remember from dissecting the eye, was nothing more. That's where the sensory apparatus is. So that's the blind spot, and adjacent to that is that area of, sorry, got a better illustration. I don't. Where it shows you the macula and, those areas where you have the best. So let me go over here. So remember, when we start looking at the retina, and this is where the physiology kind of starts, you have rods and cones. Easiest to remember is cones, CO, cones for color. You have about 20 times more rods than cones. So most of and the way rods are positioned, mostly peripherally, because we utilize them in the absence of adequate light. Our color vision requires a lot of light. Just the way if you're doing photography, to really get good photography, even with the kind of really upgraded phones that we have, and the cameras that I have with it are just remarkable today compared to the way that things used to be like that. So dim light, peripheral vision, much more numerous, much more sensitive to a tiny bit of light allows you to see. That's why we can see so well at night, and particularly things peripherally where you might miss something right in front of you. And how often around where we live here with deer freaking everywhere. Oh. The only one who picks up on it, the dog picks on that creep. It's a big dog out there. It's a deer. Cones, bright light, highest resolution, greatest concentration, the fovea centralis, the tiny pit that's in the macula lutea. That's the whole idea of corrective lenses, to focus the light there. So here, and it's interesting how it is, the pigmented layer, it's really, this is where the light, so when we looked at the eye, the retina that we looked on the interior of that eyeball when we sectioned it was here. So the light's coming in, passing through there, and going to that pigmented region, depending on its frequency. And I'm not going to do the physics of it, believe me. It then triggers the rods and the cones. And to me, the most interesting thing about the physiology is it works sort of in reverse. It is, understand this is, we're not creating an action potential as much as we're taking it away. So we're hyperpolarizing. So in other words, we are creating a farther distance away from the action potential. When the action potential ceases, that's what effectively triggers our response, or the fact that has triggered the nerve. So we're basically taking something that is emanating action potentials and stopping them to create a signal, which is the opposite of almost anywhere else in our body. So you have the rods and the cones, which are based on pigments. Then you have, those are the principal photosensitive areas. Then you have the bipolar cell, that's responsible for changing the signal from a photo signal and the potential there to an electrical signal, and then it's picked up by the ganglionic cells, who effectively form the optic nerve as it exits by the blind spot and works its way by way of the optic chiasm back to the thalamus. Okay, and here it is microscopically, where you have the pigmented area of the choroid, the pigmented layer of the retina, and then the start of the outer portions of the rods and the cones. Their nuclei, the bipolar nuclei, and the nuclei of the ganglia, how we discern those layers. So it derives its blood supply, the photoreceptors, from blood vessels that are in that pigmented layer to ones that are on the interior, derive it from the arteries and veins, respectively, of the arteries and veins that accompany the optic nerves. Again, great snapshot, just to refresh your memory. It's not often you can look inside a structure grossly without using and be able to actually see arterioles. Here you can. That's why looking at what we call eye grounds, and nowadays you don't have to use the ophthalmoscope, the technology and such. When you get your eyes looked at, they do this with an elaborate device or devices, and they'll be happy to put a picture of it on your flash drive. When you pay all that money for your eye exam. Ugh. But that's because vessels here will be the vessels in your kidney, the vessels in your tiny capillaries. Because they're all the same. So when we see irregularities there, again, remember I told you that story. When I was a heavy smoker, they noticed that. My physician noticed that using an ophthalmoscope. And then with the technology, these 30 or 40 years later, I was amazed when the eye doctor said, I think you were a smoker, but you stopped. That's just about flabbergasted. And detached retina problem, usually traumatic in nature, all those types of things that are there. We're not going to do the segments, the vitreous versus the aqueous center or the glaucoma nugget or anything along those lines, because this is all structure, etc. Which brings us back to the physiology. We'll X out of that. I just want to start the physio and then we'll be done. Fair enough?
Sounds good.
I don't want to bore you. How long can you listen to me?
How long will I listen to you?
How long can anybody listen to me? Even I can't say I'm listening to myself.
What time did lab start? 3?
Yeah,
I
a little.
at about 3:06. You were in the demo by yeah, that's why I stopped listening. Then I have it kick-started it up again.
God.
Would you rather me lie?
No.
Okay.
As they say, honesty is the best policy. Or Geico. I thought that was clever. Okay, this is the Dr. Buxton stuff. I don't do physics. I don't do teeth. Okay? And I don't do plants.
And where are these posted?
Oh, this is week 2
Week
on your blackboard, yeah.
And the lab portion or the?
No, in the lecture portion. I just use the lecture blackboard shell. So they're A, B, we're in B. And we will spend most of our time with B, C, and D. There's not a lot in E, I don't find, that we really need to talk about. I mean, it's more detail. So we're not going to do that. But if you did not know, there's 3 basic colors: blue, green, and red. When you talk about color blindness, it's a genetic absence. Color blindness is, we always have somebody doing color blindness for the physiology presentations. It's very interesting. There's some different things that color blindness is associated with. It's sex-linked recessive. You're familiar with that from genetics? My dad had that. And so when you got those diagrams where he's like 57 and, the red, green, he couldn't see it. I could easily enough. Things like that. There's interesting in association with bipolar disorder and color blindness. No, my dad would certainly not have been in that type of thing. And never even any hint of anything like that. Go sit. So the whole idea, remember, light is bent 3 different times. We're going through a convex area as it goes through the cornea, and then it goes into a convex area as it enters the lens, and a concave area as it exits the lens. So we're bending it 3 different times, okay? And so, and refraction occurs, well, obviously, we go through certain structure from one medium to another that are there. And so those lenses and the distinction on how it passes, and again, I'm not going to do it. So the light is refracted 3 times, entering the lens, entering the cornea, entering the lens, leaving the lens. The majority of the refractory power is in the cornea, okay? But it doesn't change. And again, we obviously change lens shape when we're looking at near or far vision. That is there. And this is the whole idea. The distance beyond which no change in lens shape is needed is that 20. That's where we get 20/20. Being able to see effectively at 20 feet a certain size structure. Because that's where the ciliary muscles are completely relaxed in distance, which causes a pull on the ciliary zonule, and as a result, it stretches the lens flat. Once it's flat, it can't get any flatter, is what they're saying. And they're just showing, remember the suspensory ligaments? And so as the muscle relaxes, what it does effectively is it stretches and pulls on the lens. When the muscle contracts, sort of reverse, okay, it closes the pupil, the good news, but what it does is now it allows the lens to become much rounder. Sort of what we saw when we did the dissection. If you remember, the lens was certainly not flat. It was almost like a pea. You want to think of it that way. So they're just showing you the distinctions there. And again, these are things that change. And we do a unit right at the very end on, which I like to do at the end if I'm here to do it, aging. Joking. those things that happen to you as you get older, which I have some authority on.
A little bit.
It's,
You're not that old, so.
oh, I don't feel that old. I just certain days you do.
Okay. Do you feel old today?
No. When I'm with you guys, it is the most energetic thing it is. My mind's sharp. I'm physical. I love doing this stuff. Well, it's not just you, but mostly you.
I said make us, all of us.
I wonder what the class would really be like.
What do you mean?
You're a treat.
Thanks.
So all of those types of things that are there, and we'll get into parasympathetic and sympathetic, etc. So the most common of these is what I have, nearsightedness. Okay, and then this is where the whole science behind lens correction. Some people are far, and astigmatism, all one word, because people used to say it was and then stigmatism was like magically a new word. It's not. And there's different ways that they grind the lens. This is where those LASIK procedures, which some people have been very successful with. I asked about them, but they said at my age, and this is when I was in, maybe 15 years ago, they said, no, not as much of an instant success. So now we get into the different segments of the photoreceptors. This is more of the physiology. They're modified nerve cells, okay? The tips are embedded in that pigmented layer, which is important, so you don't have to, so it doesn't scatter the light, okay? And so you have the photopigments. Those are what change shape. This is the interesting thing. They go from a bent formation to a straight formation, and that's the whole magic of this. And the beauty is we constantly make them. When they're activated, they break down, and when they're inactivated, they're remade. So it's been a real, for people who have been exposed to a very large amount, like a flash of light, and they'll temporarily lose their vision. The treatment is fairly straightforward. Just basically make it so that no light gets in for about 48 hours. And it allows basically the pigments to reconstruct. And if their vision's going to return, it does. They've known about that for a long time, that you had to basically take away the entirety of the vision, any light whatsoever, because you'll see as it goes on. So photopigments change shape as they absorb light. The internal segment joins the cell body, okay? And so you'll see it here. So here you can see it embedded in that pigmented portion. It's there, the melanin granules are there, and you can see the stack of the rods being more of a cylindrical shape, and here the cone, aptly named because of the conical shape, as it comes to somewhat of a point at the tip. So, and the photopigments are within the discs, and again, based on what type of a photopigment, what color, or unless it's a rod, what nanometric reading it is on the visible spectrum. So they're very damagingly easy. So if the retina would detach, that would be a problem. The intense light, that's what I was talking about before. Okay, and as you can see, those segments every 24 hours remove. The tips fragment off, they're phagocytized, and they reform. That's the beauty of it. So it's we're very, very fortunate. Okay, so rods, light sensitive, and because of their location, night and peripheral vision, one pigment. So basically, it's like in the old days before we had color computers, everything was grayscale. Do you remember grayscale? Things were very monochromatic. The first monitor I had was an Amdec 310A, which was black with like a yellow or an amber lettering. That was state of the art 38 years ago. It was the first computer I had in my office. So as you can see, it's not as distinctive as color, where we have a lot of definition in the input. So the pathways converge, 100 rods, one ganglion. So you're getting a lot of signal information. Something out there, it's moving, it looks like an animal, but that's, it could be a deer, it could be a dog, it could be a buffalo. So the Buffalo fans are hiding right now because the Bills, all I heard on sports radio, if not now, when? I guess the answer is simple, not. Whereas we tease Buffalo, 2 words, wide right. 41 yards, 44 yards, wide right. So, bright light for cones, more quickly reactive, vividly colored, non-convergent. So it's basically a 1-to-1. When a cone fires, it's very, very specific. So you get very acute detail. It's like seeing if you remember what TVs were like, high def versus not high def. I mean, it was dramatic. I can't imagine what sports was like. If you're a hockey fan, hockey wasn't great on TV. You really couldn't follow the puck. Fox, when it picked up the NHL package, tried to put something in the pucks so you would see it on the ice, and it really didn't work terribly well. And high def changed all that. It really changed sports watching dramatically. From someone who's a confirmed sportsaholic. I have to go to SAA, Sportsaholics Anonymous. I'm a sportsaholic. I've been addicted for the last 72 years. I will.
Did you always like the Steelers or just when you moved here?
The first game I saw was Steelers. I was a Giant fan in New York, growing up in New York City. The first game was Giants Steelers. I was destined to be a Steelers fan. 63 years ago. Because I told you that story. My uncle was retired with the guy who was my aunt and uncle and the head trainer during the Terry Bradshaw years. They built retirement homes together in Florida. He was on the sidelines in Steelers game, even though we were from New Jersey. But the Steelers were like, they bought all of my dad and uncle's company's padding. So he was on a first name basis, except for Chuck Noll, who was somewhat standoffish, very professional. Like Lynn, they go, "Hey, Lynn," that kind of a relationship. So it became that way. I just didn't listen because in spring training that year, the Steelers won the first Super Bowl. They went 6-0, and Terry wasn't even the quarterback most of the time. That Joe Gilliam and Terry Hanratty from Notre Dame, who's from Butler, PA. And my uncle said, I heard from Ralph, that was the trainer, Ralph Berlin. He goes, he thinks we've got it this year. Why didn't Matt put money on it? I don't listen to people. My 40-year-old son at age 10 goes, I hear Apple's going to be really big, Dad. And the stock was like $10 a share. You ought to put some money. Did I listen? Would I be working here? What an F up. Okay, and there's just a comparison. Color blindness, sex-linked, 8 to 10% of males, red-green like my dad had, all those types of things. The key issue, we're almost done, because I can see you're getting antsy, are these opsins. So the molecule that combines with one of 4 proteins, which they call opsins, to form, they're almost all from vitamin A, why it's an essential vitamin. And why they always tell you foods with vitamin A, if you have visual things, carrots, make you see better. 4 opsins are rhodopsin in rods, and the 3 depending on which color they are. So sometimes because of the overlap, we have a sort of a richness of color vision. All those types of things, the best way I can explain it. So they are different 3-dimensionally. The retinal isomers are bent in the dark, and when they absorb light, they straighten out. So they go from, just like we do remember we were talking about the Golgi, cis and trans. Okay? Cis is the bent form, trans is the straight form. So the light activated is trans, you should remember that. That initiates reaction that lead to electrical impulses along the optic nerve. Again, when we get to the actual mechanics of it, you're going to see, rather than creating an action potential rather than depolarizing, it hyperpolarizes. That's the interesting nuance. So pigment captures the light energy, converts it to a receptor potential. So the purple pigment is in the rods is rhodopsin, and this is what it goes. You're constantly synthesizing. When it absorbs the light, it bleaches. Then they're gone, and then they start to regenerate. Okay, and it depends. So the pigment synthesis, opsin and the cis retinol combine in the dark. When they're exposed to light, it goes cis to trans relatively rapidly. They separate or break down, and then the trans retinol, once you convert back, goes back to the cis form once light is removed. So it's a constant forms, activates, is destroyed, and regenerates. That's the consistent pattern. And they show it to you. Here's the so-called bent form. You can see it molecularly. You certainly don't have to know the structure. It's not OChem or biochem, right? Did you have to know this for like biochem? Yeah. And then here it is cis and trans. So however it works, and it's just keeps going. It's like ATP and ADP. Just keeps going and going. Okay. The light activated, and it's a G protein pathway called transducin. Okay. And eventually it will break down into the phosphodiesterase, the cyclic GMP. cGMP holds cation channels. Sodium and calcium enter and depolarize the cell in light. So this is when it's dark. So the channel effectively is depolarized when it's dark. In light, the cyclic GMP breaks down, the channels close, the cells hypolarize, and you can see by the exclamation point, that's the signal for vision. So to me, when we look at nerve and muscle, that's opposite almost everything that we see. Not everything, but almost everything. Some of the neurotransmitters are hyperpolarizing. When we talk about chloride-gated channels, we'll get there. And they just show you've seen this a million times. Light, transduced, phosphodiesterase, cyclic GMP. Okay, so when it's open in the dark, but it closes in the light with the change and that hyperpolarization. Okay, so they are graded potentials to start. Graded potentials are insufficient to produce action potentials. So they stop releasing the inhibitory. In this case, glutamate is usually not inhibitory, it's inhibitory in the eye. Okay, they no longer inhibited depolarized release neurotransmitter onto the ganglion cells, and the ganglion cells generate that. So once there's a sufficient amount of them activated, that will then create the action potential by the fact it's no longer being inhibited. So in this way, it's sort of like alcohol works the same way. It's called a disinhibitory. So it normally inhibits things that would cause unusual behavior. In the case of alcohol, when many people, you know how some people when they drink go.
Hi, should I ask Stein that? Okay, Dr. Stein, who would win in a fight? Tony the Tiger or the Kool-Aid Man?
I'm thinking Tony the Tiger.
Alright.
But Tigger would win. Not Tony the Tiger, but Tigger. The wonderful thing about tigers are wonderful things. Winnie the Pooh. The late Paul Winchell was great. He was the voice for that. Their feet are made out of rubber. Their tails are made out of springs. So here you are, light, and bing. There we go. So just showing, and I'm not going to scroll through. You can scroll through this. So the bleaching occurs even in starlight. You don't need a lot of light for your rods. In bright light, it's very fast. So the trouble, and you've seen it all here. You know, when you'll be in a dark room and all of a sudden they'll turn the lights on, it's like, oh my God. Because that scatter is almost overwhelming. So rods and cones can adapt both light and dark. So from darkness into bright side, that's the glare. Rods and cones strongly stimulated, a lot of pigment breaks down. That's the glare. You constrict your pupils almost immediately, and then it takes a certain amount of time. I mean, so and there's different variations of this. Some people adapt more quickly, some more slowly. Like I'm borderline night blind. I have a very difficult time if I'm going to walk the dog at night or anything like that. That if I get out, like, I really have a difficult time. It doesn't adapt very quickly. I know my kid in the Navy had no problem with that type of stuff. When he was doing training with the Marines, I said, "How did you do it?" He goes, "I have no trouble sleeping." Thank goodness. So we're moving from bright light to darkness. The cones stop functioning. The bright light bleached rod pigments, so they're still turned off. Okay, and the pupils do dilate. So, and then it begins to accumulate. So, maximum sensitivity, if you're going into darkness, for a lot of people, takes some time. Some people just take longer than others. So, I get very little it takes me a good 15, 20 minutes. I'm not a big fan of driving at night unless I'm already driving, comparatively. So, rod function is hampered. I don't quite have that at this point in time. And certainly, and it's not a big deal to taking a vitamin A supplement. Again, fat soluble vitamins, you can go a little overboard on if you're not careful. And RP, or retinitis pigmentosa, is a terrible disorder that you do not want to have. I mean, maybe there's more advanced treatments today. A very close friend of my first wife's family had that. I don't think they knew enough about it. Her children were adopted because she was concerned about passing it on. I mean, she functioned her whole adult life in absolute blindness. I mean, her husband had died young. So, for holiday dinner, she was always at her house. So let's stop here before I do the anatomical pathways. You've had enough of me bothering you with this. It's 4:30. So thanks very